Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. We are talking about being human. I think I've commented that in Portuguese, we can't do this joke, but in English, you can say that there is a difference between a human being and being human. There's a difference to it. It's not just about being born as a human being, but it's about being able to enhance, to nurture, to strengthen those aspects of our nature which make us take us to living a better kind of a life. So, today we're going to talk about the ephemeral, the impermanent, the passing, the passenger nature of our condition. So, we usually like to form mnemonic memory traces which are long lasting. We love history. We love to find an artifact that was buried 2,000, 3,000 years ago. It causes us thrills. It is fantastic. It must be a very strong experience. I had one of those in Saragossa in Spain. Right in the middle of the city, you have a Roman ruin. And it's stunning to see that right beside a modern building, you have these ancient things. We have these ancient buildings. So we like the idea of things that last unchanged. But that can be noxious when this tendency of ours goes beyond what is convenient. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the individual and the impermanence that involves our existence. Jacques Lacan, which is a French psychoanalyst, said once that he said it in French of course, but it's in order to the species horse to be perpetuated, it is necessary for the individual horse be mortal. So, for the species to be perpetuated, to be, let us say, eternal, everlasting, it is necessary that the individual horse be mortal, die at some point. We've talked a while ago about the immortals of there can only be one. Remember that Highlander film and story? Now today we're going to talk about a bit of the idea of our finitude. The fact that whatever we do, whatever we are, whatever we say has a period where it's valid, and then it loses this validity. It's a validity range, just like we have with certain kinds of foods we buy. It's been industrialized or prepared, and it's valid up to such and such a date. After that, it's not adequate for human consumption. And what our lives has something similar. There is a right time, a valid time for certain things to happen, and they pass. So, usually that is taken in a very negative way. We think of it as nothing is worthwhile because everything passes. What am I going to do with life since one day I am going to die? We get very dramatic, very over emotional, maybe even mushy with these ideas. But today we're going to talk about these things in a more fluid, in a more friendly way. We are going to talk about this. The idea, what goes very badly with us, is the idea of the individual. That kills us a lot. Because in the political realm, we always have the individual must come above the polis, the group, the community. No, the community comes before the individual. So, in the first proposition, we have the possibility of a caprice being a burden for everyone. And on the other possibility, we have people being oppressed by a community. a collectiveness. So that shows how difficult it is to deal with the idea of an individual. The second point is that the individual derives from indivisible, cannot be divided. Now, that can be fallacious if we think of the individual from the point of view of his social boundaries. Why? Because seldom we are undivided. In our previous video we said sometimes it's tough to be non-judgmental because we often have a double feeling toward things. And this double feeling shows we are divided. We can be divided between two values. So I want to stay in bed, but I have to get to work. Or it's very pleasant here but on the beach, but I have to go back to work. Or here this is being very, very nice. I'm very sorry for that person, but I have to take measures that are harmful or disagreeable for that person. So there is always a division going on, some kind of division. We are always sort of split. In certain situations, it goes very far away. We can go to very miserable situations due to that, but in the most of times, it's part of life. Now, that is not because people like to talk a lot about reality, but when we talk about reality, we have to make sure we understand very well what we are calling reality, because it can be tricky. When we think of the idea of being divided, it's not about the actual ultimate nature of reality. It's about our nature of conceptualizing. Every concept is dual in a certain way. That doesn't mean conceptual thinking. That doesn't mean conceptual working is useless. That's a very, very silly way of thinking of it. So since reality is not conceptual, there's no use using concepts. Silly. Because what I'm doing here, I'm talking here on a video. The capacity, the ability to having developed the technology to do this was through concepts. So we have to be careful and not be ungrateful towards civilization. Everything is wrong. Everyone is clueless. But I know better. Strong. Too heavy for myself and too heavy for those who listen to me. We often find ourselves split between two ideas or two directions to choose. We are unthinkable as indivisible, except from an organic point of view. From an organic point of view, I cannot be split into. I'm not an amoeba. I'm not a starfish. Nor do I have a tail like a lizard. You can cut it off and the new tail grows. No. If I get split, I get killed. That's the metaphor about King Solomon we used a few months ago. King Solomon wanted to cut the child, the two mothers disputing the maternal rights over the child. And the king says, okay, split him in two and give half to each mother. And then one of them said, no, don't do that. Why? Because she knew that if you split the child in half, if you divided that child would die. But from a moral point of view, from an emotional point of view, whatever you think, that child grew up and that child was certainly experienced the hard endeavor of being split into two ideas, two choices, two emotional states. So he was divided, but divided in his intentions, not in his organism. We might get ourselves, except from an organic point of view, but still from an organic point of view, we can get ourselves into trouble. And where is that? That is where you have a pregnant woman, you have a pregnant lady. Then you might be challenged in your understanding about what is an individual, because is it one woman? Is it one person? Is it two persons? Two people? Is it what's going on? A woman and a child in her womb. Individuals. It's up to you. Then we have another, from literature, we have another experience, another example that is very, very strong. And it's in the book of Lemuel, written by Jonathan Swift. It's the adventures, the voyages of Lemuel Gulliver, where Gulliver is a physician, he's a doctor, and he's also the guy that writes the stories of the trips. And he's been in several places, and all of us are fairly acquainted with the idea of Lilliput, the island where you have the dwarfs, tiny guys. Then you have other islands, and each island has a special, a very specific moral issue addressed. One of them is the island where you had the people who never died, and they would age, get miserably old, but they wouldn't die. And then Gulliver asks the mayor, so they must be adored. And then, no, they're not. They're abhorred, because they are useless, and they have become completely dirty, and they have become completely unable to do anything useful in life, and the islanders have to keep them. So they're much more, anyway, they were much more an example of exhaustion than exactly an example of wisdom. These men cut out, it's a very sarcastic book, really. It's a very ironic, filled up with ironic. These are very obscene images of extreme conditions. We find that it would be unbearable to be immortal. And actually, if you stop to think of it, one does get under the impression that we are born to actually sometime die. This saying of Jacques Lacan, in order for the species to perpetuate, it is necessary that the horse individual die. Because it is important to put ahead your DNA. That's the logic of life. No organism is eternal. I know there's a tree. There's some trees that are over 2,000 or 3,000 years old. Okay, but they are going to die. We're going to do our best not to. It's fantastic to see a live organism that's over a millennium. But they are going to die. That's it. And then you have these extremely short-lived bacteria. The individual bacteria lives for a few hours, and they reproduce and they proliferate like dickens. That's how life works. That's how our organism started to work. It's part of our nature, programmed to die. But it is also of our nature to not enjoy the idea of one day dying. It's not any kind of rebellion. It's no kind of unsubmission. No, there's nothing wrong with that. We're not supposed to find the idea of dying pleasant. The point is, it doesn't have to be horrifying, as many times some people seem to have it, because the idea of dying is not just stop breathing someday. Dying also involves becoming old, getting wrinkles. If you're a man, losing your hair, becoming bald. If you're a lady, losing hair, not becoming bald, but having less hair than you used to. If you're a woman, it implies stopping your periods, losing your reproductive possibility. All these things are time-bound. The point is that immortality might be something to be strived for by a species, or by the biomass or by a biome, but not by an individual. It is not given to a live being to be immortal. It's just not. If you have kids, you know you start dying. When your kid is born, you start to die. When your kid is growing up, you are getting older and older and older. Now that is perfectly acceptable if you imagine that as in the process of aging, you are also throwing your seed, not only your biological seed in having children, but your intellectual, your emotional, your spiritual seed on the generations that are sprouting. And that's about, if you think of the collectiveness of your group, of your nation, your species, your planet, then your ephemeris, impermanent nature doesn't hurt you, because the great deal, the important deal, the large picture carries on without you. You know why? Because the greatest picture, the large picture, existed, the vast landscape existed before your conscience of yourself, before the awareness of yourself, before you were born. And it's going to carry on after you have passed over. It's very interesting. But it is also of extreme relief. Relief and the collective idea. You live, you die, but then your ideas can carry on. Then your legacy can be continued. Then the things you started can be perpetuated. The most profitable way to address this issue is definitely thinking of the continuum between generations, the continuum between DNA, and the continuum in culture. That's redeeming. There is a saying in Portuguese that goes like this: anyone should have a child, write a book, plant a tree. These are three things that talk about a posterity. Three things that talk about a day after, when I leave my consciousness. It's when I lose my sentience. What is horrifying about the idea of dying? And not ceasing to live. It is ceasing to exist as a consciousness. That's what really causes despair on us. Simply blinked. Because it's not going dark. It's not about going to silence. It's just cease working. But then we can trust, again, we can trust our organism. Because this body will stop working, but my organism has already spread continuity for the next generations. So it's very important to understand that biological lifespan is one thing. Transcendence is the antidote for this apparently brief lifespan we live from our organism. So transcending is being healthy. Being human is transcending. And transcending means abandoning the concerns about your individual. And we have talked a lot here about individuality, singularity, uniqueness, and not losing these things on sight, but having the idea that our meaning in life comes from our transcendence. Thank you very much for joining us up to this point in the video. And we will be soon starting to talk about hindrances in the maintenance of our well-being. This is our next series of videos. For your time, for your attention, thank you very much. See you soon. Bye.